Now, Louis had a curious obsession with producing heirs, largely because dynastic continuity was considered essential. He might have had more luck consulting a particularly witty coin toss. The resulting family tree became complicated. His children and grandchildren were, in turns, sickly, spoiled, or mildly confused. A combination that historians describe gently as genetically complicated. Cousin marriages were standard, and these unions often produced what we might politely call peculiar health issues. One of his grandsons, Louis the Dauphin, had a childhood that could be described as both tragic and absurd. He was often sick, partly due to the charming practice of keeping children heavily swaddled and separate from fresh air. His education involved endless lessons in Latin, fencing, and etiquette, which might have made him both refined and exhausted had he survived the rampant illnesses of the court. He did not, and his father, Louis XV, eventually inherited the throne with a body slightly less resilient than a porcelain teacup in a drafty room. Meanwhile, let's drift over to the Stuarts of Britain, because they had their own flair for combining misfortune and stubbornness. Charles I, for instance, was a king with a taste for the theatrical and a tragic disregard for political practicality. He loved his robes, his collars, and particularly long tense silences during parliamentary sessions. Unfortunately for him, Parliament was not particularly inclined to enjoy these silences, which eventually led to a civil war. Charles was eventually executed because, of course, he was, and in case you're wondering, he had children who grew up largely confined by tradition, illness, and the looming shadow of political instability. Meanwhile, let's drift northward to Russia, where the Romanovs cultivated a dynasty that was simultaneously brilliant and slightly terrifying. Peter the Great, as we've mentioned, had a fascination with modernization, drilling his nobles into shape, and occasionally terrifying anyone who dared step too close. His descendants inherited both his brilliance and his peculiar temperaments. Catherine the Great, for example, married into the Romanov line and became, eventually, one of Russia's most celebrated rulers. She was intelligent, politically astute, and exceptionally skilled at managing the delicate balance between public image and private ambition. Her children, however, were a mixed bag. Some were competent, some were troubled, and some were quietly ignored until the weight of dynastic expectation could no longer be avoided. Some of these children, raised in immense palaces with strict tutors, developed peculiar habits. One princess reportedly collected insects obsessively, labeling them with Latin names and arranging them according to color and size. Another prince meticulously counted coins every morning before breakfast, convinced that miscounting could foreshadow